asymmetric cut. On the other side. Let's try full frontal next. Still testing the Gin EVORA and the Genie X-Lite. So what I'm going to do now is a little bit of launching, ground handling. So what I'm going to do first of all, I'm going to launch the glider from the side, bring it around. Now let's give it a try and see what happens. That's it. So there, that brings it out to the side. Pulled it a bit too much so it collapsed. And then you can see the glider's filling up with air, coming up really nicely. You can see for the level of glider, the cell openings are a little bit on the smaller side, but yeah, till it fills up. Oh, there I wasn't very careful about my control. I got a glider wake or some turbulence, but there, I've got a tuck. So it shows you do need to fly the glider a little bit actively as it comes up. I'm just getting some gusty, crappy air, I think that's all. But you can see the EVORA copes with that very nicely. No surprise. And bringing the glider down, generally when it's breezy, I advocate this is a technique to get the glider down. It's much better than trying to just stuff the brakes and get the glider down, and you've got much more randomness doing that, more chance of getting dragged, and this is really much easier. Bring the glider off to the side and then drop it down to the side. So now just kiting the glider. I have got still quite thermic, and I think I'm getting a bit of crappy air, gusty air from thermals and the terrain ahead. The EVORA feels pretty solid on the ground and relatively easy to control for the class. Feels totally fine for that. And it sits it's quite pitch stable. It's a bit more rolly, but also the harness contributes to that. The Genie X-Lite is a bit rolly and makes it a bit more rolly. But yeah, the glider itself is pretty pitch stable, so that makes it nice and easy to control. So now I'm going to do with the Gin EVORA, I'm going to just do some launches where I'm going to bring the glider up through the middle of the power band, the sort of more basic kind of launch, rather than bringing it up round the side. And that way, see how the glider is with that. I'm going to try it with and without the risers and see how it is. I'll give some feedback as I go along. Well, one of the things is it's breezy, testing out holding the glider down, so I can just hold the rear risers. That's okay, that works fine. When it's windy, you'll find that the glider can lift up some more, the wind can get underneath the trailing edge. That's why I favour holding the rear lines and the brake lines like so. And because the stabilo lines are on the B risers, they're not on the rear risers, that means that works very well on the EVORA. There's no pulling on the tips when I do that. So that works well. Other techniques that some pilots favour, you can just hold the rear risers and the A risers, and that also works well. And then kind of works, I found this technique works particularly if it's kind of very, very variable thermic conditions and the glider's kind of blows around a bit and you're trying to build your wall. But you can kind of see that when I'm doing that, you can see the tips lifting up, and that's why I prefer to hold the brake lines. When I'm doing this, there's a bit of a tendency for the tips to sort of come up. Okay, now let's just do a launch. Just a basic launch using the A's, cross brake, standard cross brake technique, just checking my airspace. When you launch like this, the most important thing is to launch with your body, with all the launches in fact, but we're holding the risers so that we can adjust the launch as we want. You probably don't need the risers at all to launch with this glider in this wind, but what I'll do is pull back with my body, then put a little bit of pressure on the A's to bring it up nicely. And it has to be said, yeah, the EVORA has quite an easy controlled launch. I think at the moment the wind is particularly smooth and it's very laminar and easy. Overall, I have found the ground handling, the launch is nice and right for the class. Pilot demands. It's not the easiest, but certainly totally fine for the class. Stalling the glider back down. Actually, the EVORA reminds me a little bit of the Atlas and the Sprint 3 in that when there is some breeze, if you're just using the brakes, then the glider can still want to come up. So that's where using the rear risers is definitely better, I find. Now this time, I'm going to pull the glider up purposefully a bit hard to make it come up a bit too quick and see what happens. So here am I pulling on the A's. Okay. So you don't want to do that. Glider came up fast. I had that plucking feeling going on there, definitely getting lifted up off my feet. If you did that, then the glider's going to build up too much momentum. And if you don't catch it right, as I did then, very likely you're going to get plucked off your feet. So again, fine for the class, but not as forgiving as some low Bs, I feel. Well, I must be honest, I don't hugely enjoy flying so much when there's so many pilots around like this. You never know what they're going to do. So it's just got a bit of a thermal lift there. Is the space behind me clear to 360? So the EVORA's turn is very soft, calm, reassuring, a bit slow, I find. Turn is slightly more on the rolly side, so you can turn it nicely, but I find that just don't want to use too much inner brake. Do want to give a bit of outer brake as well, just to keep the turn more flat, otherwise it will go a bit more rolly and you'll lose out a bit on the sink rate. This is Nancy on the 1002. Oh, dropped out of that thermal. So yeah, with the EVORA, just talking about the brakes. So the brake travel, you can see there's contact at this point, like so. I find the best brake position for handling is to just do the classic half wrap from that position, half wrap. As with most gliders, yeah, my impression from flying with others that the general performance is pretty good for a low to mid B. The aspect ratio suggests more of a mid B, but the way it flies and that kind of feels more like a low to mid B. On a day like today, it's a bit windy and a bit breezy and the choppy thermals are being broken up a bit. The glider feels on the good side, calm and reassuring. On the other side, it's kind of feels like it kind of gets knocked back as it goes into the thermals rather than biting in. That's probably a bit more to expected in this class. Whew. Bit hectic. Gliders all over the place. Yeah, I think the Gin EVORA feels like it's actually quite calm and stable in its feeling and turns. Noticing with the EVORA, it does feel very calm and stable. It's got a tendency as I go into thermals, even though I'm quite well loaded near the top of the weight range on it. So I'm going into bits of lift, it keeps getting knocked back a bit. A little bit of a delay to go into the thermals.
One eternity later.
I seem to have gone into some convergence or something. Just going forwards, going up, 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 up at 3 meters a second. Yippee! But I'll be honest, I'm a bit cold. So the Gin EVORA. So yeah, Nancy and I have flown sizes small and medium now quite a bit. Nancy's flown the small size, which I'm flying today as well, because I've got lighter kit, so my all-up weight is lower. When I flew the medium, I then flew with heavier kit to put myself in a better place in the weight range. And as always, we've tested the gliders, well, I particularly have tested the gliders with different harnesses and in different parts of their weight ranges. My feeling with the EVORA, it's the aspect ratio. The aspect ratio is more like a mid-B, And Jin, I think, seem to be pitching the glider as their sort of low to mid B wing. I think, if I'm right, it replaces the Atlas 2 and also the Sprint 3, which Jin had for a while. And I feel already, having flown the EVORA some more, for me it feels like the EVORA is kind of between those two gliders. So for a low B, it's a little bit more on the sporty side, so a little bit, yeah, and for a mid B, it feels right for a mid B to me. And the feeling of the glider is very comfortable and reassuring. The agility is moderate, and the performance seems good for the level of glider. For my testing, although I might have to revise this because I seem to be higher and further out than everybody else today, but as I say, that's just how things have worked out. Performance feels good for the class, but it feels like from my testing comparing with others, it's not exceptional in the class. It's a good performance, and particularly I've noticed with the climb rate when I've been soaring around on the ridge, and the climb rate seems very good, but not exceptional. It feels to me like Jin haven't tried to really push the performance of the glider to be the best performing glider in the class. They've more really made a glider that's right for the class and well pitched and got good all-round performance. So I think from that point of view, it's very good. If that's what you're looking for, then that's ideal. But if you wanted the best performing paraglider in this class, then I think there's some others that maybe have a bit of an edge on it. And even though it's been out now a few seasons, the Phi Beat is one that comes to mind. So I have to say the Advanced Epsilon is another one that's got really excellent performance. But what I like about the EVORA, what I feel about it, is that it's just a good all-round package for what you're getting for a low to mid glider. And I think, as well as talented beginners might go for this as a first wing, I think another group of pilots that are going to be wanting to go for it are pilots who actually have been flying for a good while, who are experienced pilots, maybe also pilots upgrading to the second or third glider, but even pilots who've been flying for a good while and they just want a nice, easy kind of low to mid B glider that's they can fly and just have good performance, but feel very comfortable flying when they know what it's like when the conditions get really sporty and strong. Then they know that they can feel very comfortable about the glider. Actually, since I'm flying this combination of the Genie X-Lite and the EVORA, two Jin products, I think actually that, again, for some pilots, they might really like this combination. It's a relatively lightweight harness, pod harness, but with quite agile handling, quite weight shifty feel, and combined with the EVORA, that makes the EVORA more agile, gives it a bit more on the agility side. I'll try the speed system. So first of all, with the X-Lite, getting my foot on the speed system, I've got boots on, so it's a little bit more tricky, but it's okay. Got the first bar, going on to the second step. There we go. So I've managed to get the pulleys locked together. Now the EVORA doesn't have a BC bridge, doesn't have a BC... Whoa! So funny, I was such a scaredy cat. So it doesn't have a BC bridge, but you can still, with gliders without a BC bridge, you can still fly on the rear risers, but of course what it does is put a crease in the rear glider, so it's not as efficient, but you can still do it. There we go. Let's just try that again. So looking at the EVORA, going on to the full speed system. Its pulleys almost locked together on both sides. There's a reasonable amount of dimpling on the leading edge, but it's fairly stable. It's not fluttering around. like some gliders, so it's pretty good, and it feels pretty good on that. Let's try some collapses. Now, because of this harness, I think it's going to make the collapses a bit more dynamic. Asymmetric collapse. Not a massive amount of height, so let's try full frontal next. And let's go for an asymmetric on the other side. Checking height. I'm going to test flying along and testing the point of spin resistance. So I brake the brake hard, and there's the glider spinning like so. And let's try on the left hand side again. I'll brake hard, pull it that there, and there's the glider starting to spin. Well, the harness is definitely affecting how the glider's reacting there. But that behaviour that I just saw there feels to me definitely more towards the mid B than the low B. And the collapses, the turn, you can see the amount of turn I had there. And recently I was testing some other low B wings, and the behaviour was quite a lot more benign than that. So yeah, I would definitely put the pilot demands instead in terms of instability, based on only those quick tests, but that my feeling is this glider is more of a mid B rather than a low B. That's what I would be most happy to advise it as.